for the show.
We can work on that.
We can. Oh, I'm sure we'll be able to find something. Maybe I was thinking maybe the Muppets or something like that. Anyway, hello everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of SalesTV. And we genuinely hope that this is becoming a safe place for salespeople to come and hang out and chat and debate things. So I'm Adam. I'm your host for today. I'm a co-founder of DLA Ignite. Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm your co-host for today and founder of Sapiro.
Hi, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm probably famous for writing the book "Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Change Makers."
The book
Which is two editions, isn't it? We've got first edition and recently
there are two editions, yeah.
But third book.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you've written a book as well, Adam.
I have. I've written two books, actually. I wrote the first book about social media strategy. Then I co-wrote a book with Tim.
Okay. I'm feeling left out.
And we're joined by Andy as well. How cool is that?
Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good. Is that a mildly sweaty, Andy?
Yeah, just got back from the gym. It's 10:45 here in sunny Crete.
Okay,
so
nice.
It's like, sculptor, body beautiful, all of that stuff.
You took the words right out of our mouths, Andy.
Yeah.
Love it.
Hello, Beth. Nice to see you.
So what was on the exercise agenda this morning, Andy? Just a 20k run or a...
I am the world's most useless runner. I just mentally can't get my head around it. I love the bike, but then I moan about repetitive exercise. So my wife kind of goes, well, isn't the bike kind of repetitive for 20 kilometers? And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm out of arguments on that one. So I'm now getting into the whole weights thing because my doctor, I'm slightly diabetic. So apparently if you do weights, it burns the sugar quicker and stuff like that. So I do 20k and then I do this thing called stretching as well. Because being a bloke, Tim, you get it, jump on bike, do 20k, jump off bike, walk away, and someone goes, well, no wonder you're not supple.
Supple, yeah.
Or
suckle to the air.
Do you skip legs? Do you do leg day or do you skip legs?
I kind of always do. So my dad, God rest him, was a very competitive senior amateur cyclist. So I grew up, believe it or not, stood on roundabouts, showing race people which way to go around a course. So I grew up round cycling, and my memories are always of listening to Sean Kelly, who no one could understand as a commentator because he was so Irish, talking about the Tour de France. So I never really go a day without being on a bike somewhere.
How nice.
Yeah.
So what were we going to talk about today, gents? You had a great idea for this, Alex, didn't you?
Well, I'm not entirely sure it was my idea, but let's just frame it with what's the biggest problem for salespeople today? Right, let's try and help the sales industry today in the 40 minutes that we have. So what seems to be the biggest problem? Most companies seem to be focusing on the selling aspect. But in order to sell, you actually need to have a conversation or two with people. And I think that's the problem. Salespeople are struggling to get the conversations consistently with their target audience.
Because I see a lot of stuff coming through from sales gurus basically saying that salespeople are shit. And is that really the case?
No, I don't think they are. I think let's inject massive. I don't think there's any different percentage, Tim, in good salesperson versus bad salespeople, as there are good doctors, bad doctors, good dentists, bad dentists, good engineers, good accountants that want to align standards and stuff like that. I think there's a slight difference between salespeople and everything else, which is, and I was thinking about this in preparation, I'd like to say they're the oil in the San Andreas fault, between an organization that wants an outcome which is primarily driven by sales. Everything is driven by a sale, whether you have salespeople or not, and buyers that are skeptical because they understand that the outcome that the salesperson is required to have is not necessarily the outcome that they want. We've been through this before. We're not going to go through it again because that would be boring for viewers. But I think the reality of it is just one simple thing. There's far more skepticism on the other side of the table in this relationship than there are in other relationships. So if you're an engineer, or if you're doing your house as an example, you could upgrade your house, extend your house, or whatever. There's not that same level of skepticism and wariness of an architect sat on the other side of your kitchen table than there would be of a salesperson coming in to sell you insurance or sell you something. And I think it's this piece that we are setting people up to really be up against it. And I think it's how do we help people? And Adam, let's go back 2 years. I had a conversation walking down a towpath in Camden with you, and it's how do you become more appealing and compelling to somebody to want to have a conversation with? And if you three can't figure that out with your social media expertise and help salespeople go, the image that you project just on social media is going to help change the way that people perceive you in terms of that initial conversation, then no one can.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were quite keen that we didn't turn this into a sales pitch, but genuinely turned it into something to try to help people. And I don't know who I don't know who this is because obviously their settings we can't see the name. But I think part of the challenge is what that person said. Not the fact that people aren't listening, because clearly you have to listen, and you can't do harm by listening more rather than listening less. So that's certainly true, that listening and an ability for a salesperson to listen to somebody and actually hear what it is they're saying is really important. But again, further to Alex's point, that's focusing on something which is happening when you've already got a conversation going. You can't listen to somebody if somebody isn't talking to you. You can't deploy your challenger sale, brilliant though it is as a methodology. You can't deploy that if there isn't anybody to challenge. It's all very well to say, the medic methodology is great because you understand all of these different touch points within an organization and the roles that these different characters play in the sale. And that's absolutely right. But if nobody wants to talk to you, it's an irrelevance. And I think that a lot of the challenge is that the default position for sales teams and sales management is we'll upskill the salespeople by teaching them how to be better salespeople. We'll teach them how to run a meeting more effectively. We'll teach them how to navigate the politics of the internal politics within the client organization more effectively. We'll give them greater insights into the organization. But the challenge is that if you can't have the conversation in the first place, you can't get that toehold and start to build those relationships that every salesperson recognizes that the better the relationship, the more likely you are to be able to gain the insights and win trust and pursue something.
What you're talking about there, Adam, is what they call demand generation. And for most businesses, they think that sits within the marketing team.
Yeah.
And so that problem is given to marketing. And actually, we know that generally speaking, marketing can't solve that problem anymore because buyers are zoning out to the corporate marketing messages.
Well, they're predominantly the same, though, aren't they? I mean, we've all been in IT for a long time. If you were to get 4 big brand marketing kind of spiels, you could probably change some acronyms for the technology, but they're pretty much all going to say the same thing. And so,
buy my product because it's great.
Yeah. And I completely think that there's something on here which says actually, if I we're all in situations, and Adam, I know you're in a situation where you're in the up to your neck in the medical industry, and that's quite scary. But you're surrounded by people who have studied really hard. They've got qualifications after their name. They stand up for ethics and excellence. So even in that environment where you've got all those great markers, it's still a scary experience. buyers feel the same. It's a really scary experience to be out of control, being taken on a journey that isn't necessarily my journey, it's your journey. And actually, it does come back to the jolt effect. It's great what, and I know he's coming up, but it's this thing, isn't it, which is, actually, I fear at making a decision here because it's not necessarily my decision, it's your decision as the salesperson. And consequently, I'm not going to do it. The easiest thing for me to do to protect myself is not to do it.
Mm.
And this is because there's an inherent distrust there, do you think? That, as you said at the beginning, Andy, that the buyer often sees the salesperson as having a different agenda to them. You know, you engage an architect, you know that both of you were after a beautiful house that isn't going to leak and isn't going to fall down. The salesperson might have a different agenda to you, may not have your best interests at heart. Or is that an old-fashioned view?
No, I think they do have everyone's best interest at heart. I don't see salespeople going in. I think the Glengarry, Glen Ross, all of that stuff happens in a small percentage of sales in a specific type of sales motion and say industry. And it is very transactional. I think 90+% of salespeople are trying to do a great job. They're thinking about how they actually meet the customer's needs. The lens that they are given sometimes precludes that being as wide a view as it possibly could be. So the lens that they are given is, here's your number, here's the company expectations, maybe here's the partner channel expectations. But that's the lens they're given, and they're constantly brought back to that lens. Given the opportunity, and there's a great organization based out of Boston that have looked at this, is most salespeople now, particularly people who are under 30, are very, very intrinsically motivated. And they're out there to do the right thing for the right person. And I think it's just the lens that they are got given and the leadership focus that they are channeled through that doesn't necessarily help them, and therefore buyers are skeptical. I don't think this is a big problem to fix. The challenge that the sales industry has is that there is no requirement for a license to practice as there is in other organizations. So there's no immediate stimuli for an organization to maybe look at how it sets its sales force up for personal growth, for professional recognition. But I believe that that's changing rapidly.
Well, we saw that last week, didn't we, with IdeaGen, where Ben was guest, or the week before, where he said, you know, we have a sales academy, we ground source what the salespeople think they can sell, and we meet that with the target for what the business needs to sell, and there's very little disparity between the two things. You know, we educate and empower the salespeople, and we would rather have them walk away from a deal that isn't right, or when we haven't got the right product, rather than have them push it through. But I can't help feeling that that's abnormal in most organizations. You know, Ben is a very forward-looking individual, and he's built a successful methodology and a way of selling within an organization which does deliver results. But so often it is down to that, okay, Andy, I want you to do the right thing. However, I want you to make this number. And sometimes those two things are not happy bedfellows.
I think they can be if you have enough pipeline. And I don't want to get onto the people who don't have enough pipeline conversation, because we know that. But on the flip side of that, corporations are making a great way of the number. I think Donald has got this here. Technology has played a part in the disconnection. And if you look at some of Neil Rackham's thinking, he talks about the frown, and with the, you know, I'm guessing that we were all actually in employment of Oracle, EMC, Dell, and various others at the turn of the millennium. But let's face it, we were all making a lot of quota on the very nature that everybody thought the world was technically going to go off the end of a cliff, you know, and the World Wide Web was just about to bang. And that plethora of information and self-choice, as Donald actually puts it, was theoretically going to take all of those deals that we were used to creating So deal creation and the unexpected diagnosis and all of those things that were in the middle and forced everything transactionally or everything super complex. And you had a frown. So it smiled. And that's what Neil Rackham said was going to happen because of technology, but it actually didn't. It ended up in sort of ridiculous amounts of no deal transactions, customers not being able to understand and get through all of the marketing speak and the difference, but they still didn't trust salespeople. And actually what has happened, if you ask a lot of CEOs, that frown has returned, but we don't have the skill set and we don't have the trust in that middle ground to be able to get into people and help develop the underappreciated need and help people understand the problems that they're going to face, therefore why they want to engage in a conversation with the salesperson to avoid that pitfall.
Well, I think this is a really good point here from Chris. Less fear of missing out, more fear of messing up.
Yeah, and obviously that, yeah, go on.
No, go on, please.
I was going to say that obviously comes from the jolt effect that Andy was talking about earlier, and even Matt Dixon talks about the importance of developing your personal brand to build trust. And so I think the personal brand or professional brand, whatever you want to call it, the brand of the sales individual, not the company, that demonstrates to his or her audience that he is an expert at what he or she does and are a genuine, authentic individual is important in both before you have a relationship, before you've ever met the prospect or the target audience, as it is when you have met them.
Yeah, but I think this comes back again to conversations. You just mentioned personal brand. And I was lucky enough to be with the leadership team for OT Group, their office depot as they were. And we did ask, what's the difference between your salespeople and Lyrico salespeople? And I think we touched on it. And it was like, it's the personal brand. Mm. But actually, if I look at LinkedIn, the personal brand of people doesn't scream out at me. Great friend of mine who used to be global leader in recruitment for IBM. He once said to me in 2009 or early 2010, it was like, Andy, there can't be a global downturn, And I went, you're kidding me, Kevin. I said, it's fundamentally we're in the toilet. I mean, nothing's going well. He went, that can't be sick because every single sales CV I get across my desk tells me they're smashing it. And I've never forgotten that. It is going to be one of those things that goes with me to my deathbed. But he's right. So if you look at LinkedIn, it's primarily a recruitment website that's trying to do quite a bit about B2B connections. But people still use it as people are going to hunt me and give me a job, or I make myself appealing. And I'm struggling anywhere. And anybody in the audience, if you want to give me, I'll take you for a meal at any place. If you can find somebody with a CV or a profile on LinkedIn that says you'll be out mowing the lawn, knowing you, is basically, reasonably good salesperson, just about hitting target.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ethically working hard, sometimes not hitting goal. I'd hire that person just for the authenticity if they were, but everyone's like 150% of goal, super successful salesperson, super customer centric, highly motivated. Yeah.
It's a super successful salesperson, 150% of goal, President's Club every year for the last 10 years, open to work.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the salesman on 150% of target never gets laid off.
No, not at all. And so that's the thing, isn't it? Which is when we actually start, and the great thing is that there is now a qualification that is in social selling, which is really, really important, which I think can teach people the right behaviors because it's really hard. I think we need to just show people, because even members of the ISP, which I founded, still don't know how to use the currency of their professionalism and their CPD on their brand.
Well, here's really interesting couple of comments. So Krishna said this, it's just connection and nothing more. And I misinterpreted that. I thought he was saying on LinkedIn, you just connect to people and nothing more. But then his next comment is, I call it a professional Facebook. And that's exactly what it is. You know, it's about getting to know people. It's about connecting in the truest sense of the word and forging some sort of relationship. But you can't do that, can you, by saying, I'm 150% of target, because everybody's 150% of target until Tim decides he needs to be 160% of target to stand out. And then Alex decides he needs to be 180%. So actually, you have to be honest and open. Not about, I'm not a very good salesman, because clearly you're not going to get hired if that's the case. But you have to lead with who you are. I mean, you were the one that brought up personal brand, Andy. And I think that the mistake that people often make is that personal brand and CV are not the same thing. And lots of people conflate the two, don't they?
I think I'd add to that in complete agreement. And track record isn't your personal brand.
No.
Your personal brand is your values, your ethics, your integrity.
Yeah. What you
stand for. You know, and you can have very professionally motivated, very ethical people who are 95% a go, and that's absolutely fine.
And now we're seeing salespeople, sales leaders who previously were very successful, but given, I'm not going to say climate, because I don't think it's solely down to the economic climate that businesses are struggling. I do think buyer behavior has a big part to play. But those previously successful sales individuals are not successful today, and they're struggling. So, you know, the CV, the look back to say, look at how great I've been in the past, doesn't mean that they're going to be great in the future.
No, and Donald's comment here about pressure of what worked before doesn't work now, and organisation teams haven't realised that yet. Absolutely. I mean, that's the key crux of what's going wrong, isn't it? That organisations are still trying to generate those conversations in the way that they might have been able to do so a decade ago, but they certainly can't do today. And the answer has always been more. Well, we'll just do more of this stuff. Even if the stuff isn't working, we'll just do more of it. We'll send out more adverts. We'll send more emails. We'll make more cold calls. We'll go to more events. We'll do all of these things, all of which is about trying to that delusional behavior. You know, if I do a pretty enough ad, the phone will start ringing. Well, actually, that's not how people buy anymore.
Yeah, it was a common theme coming into this year: do more with less. And I've heard it before. And you know, to me, saying that to salespeople, it's like saying, it's like saying, well, you need to diet 30% harder to put on 30% more weight.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, where do sales people go from here? You know, zero sales, zero pipeline is a pretty hard place to work from.
Yeah, but that line is kind of such a cliche, isn't it? You have to do more with less. But actually, that's exactly the position that organisations find themselves in. You know, their budgets for, whether you think marketing is working or not, their budgets for marketing are being cut. Their sales teams are being cut. We've laid off 10% of our sales force, and yet the number has still gone up. And it's like, well, if you can't make your number with 100% of your sales force, how are you likely to make it with 90%?
See, I think that effect has happened, but I don't think there was a conscious way of doing it. So I believe that at the start of this year, there was a top-down, in most instances, deliverance of a goal based on a theoretical headcount and set of territories, of which at least 10 to 15% were open. And last year, people were running 400% to fill those vacancies. And as there's been a little uncertainty about hyperinflation, all of those things, there has been a slowdown on the activity to fill those recs, as well as a reluctance for people to be putting themselves forward for those roles. And that's the challenge. So the outcome is exactly the same, Adam. That's not disputed. There is a big set of people that are not in the organisation that need to be, and therefore there is pressure on everybody else to pick up that slack and hit that number. And that's going to get worse. It's not going to get better, because less and less people realise what sales is. Less and less people realise what a sales role is. There's a increasing area of sales which is tech, which is not the tech we're used to. It's SaaS software, lots of things that weren't even around 10 years ago, or just very, very embryonic, which are now big, which is 25% of the global sales force could well be in that area. And therefore, more traditional sales roles that had visibility are being drowned out. And I think there's a kind of big set of stuff around this. So it's not as easy as saying, these are the challenges, and that's because someone got a red pen out. I don't think people have been getting red pens out. I think they've been holding off and maybe going, what's going to happen? But the economies are slow, but they're not in decline. We've challenged, and we're going back, and we're all getting more comfortable. Tim said this a couple of years ago. When we started work, interest rates were 15% Inflation was relatively high. We all survived on far less money than we had today. And it's this now stabilization of people going, oh yeah, my parents survived in this world. We'll all survive as well. So I think it's taking a while for wise heads, and we had one last week. Ben was a wise head, is a wise head. And he sits there, and he's a deliberate culture, deliberate organizational culture, deliberate leadership style, because primarily he came from sales. And most CEOs don't come from sales. They don't come from revenue backgrounds. They come from finance backgrounds. They might come from a marketing background, but they don't come from the revenue generation side of the house, so they don't understand it.
Is there any research to show the performance of a CFO CEO versus a sales CEO?
Good question. I doubt it,
Alex.
I mean, I think that you might be onto something there. Alex and Tim and myself, we all worked at Oracle. Oracle was, for many years, their hands-on leader was Larry Ellison. Nobody is more sales-focused in the world than Larry Ellison. He was somebody that absolutely, it was all about the sale. But I think, though, that things are changing. And, I think that the issue is that there have been, whatever it is, 700,000 jobs in tech lost in the last 12 months. And that's many of those in sales. And that's having a really big impact on the industry. And I think that the challenge is that many people are feeling insecure and scared about their position within a company. Facebook, that's making however many $1 billion a year profit, or Google, or whoever, massively profitable organizations are turning around and laying off 15% of their workforce. This is a fairly significant shift, isn't it?
Yeah, but the classic companies haven't. And most of them haven't been in sales. I mean, the Facebooks, the Metas, and all of these people have been laying off engineers like this now next week. But you can point to other organizations like Microsoft who've got 50,000 AI engineers that they're hiring and behaving in a completely different way. So I think what we're seeing there is actually a change in the fact that there is no free money anymore. And that's a very different thing. And so the investors in Meta, the investors, a lot of them are obviously venture capitalists or sort of like VE backing people. They're all looking at things now in a very, very different way. And what used to be grow at any costs and just throw money at it because money was free or even negative in some instances, now it's not. And that's changing very quickly when VCs are starting to say to their portfolios, guys, you've now got to think about EBITDA. You've now got to think about all of these things. And what actually that does is open up an opportunity for us to start talking about the caring of people. Your people are your biggest asset, not only because of personal brand, But actually, if you lose your people, it pushes your cost of your customer acquisition cost up by 50%. And that's what most of them are measured on. And so the reality comes down to, it's now a great way to start to say people are your key. They're your competitive advantage. They're the personal brand on which your corporate brand gets accelerated or diminished. And now is a different way to start thinking about these things.
So that figure though, Andy,
Yep.
just tell me that again. So by getting rid of your people, you're adding 50% cost to the cost of acquiring a customer.
So most organizations in the SaaS world have a less than 18-month tenure or turnover, and
of their people.
The cost of that is significant, because the customer acquisition cost is basically your sales cost plus your marketing cost over the number of people that you've acquired. So if you look at most salespeople in that world will be looking to targeted to acquire 120 new customers a year, 10 a month. And if you think that they may be on a 35k a year package total all in, and then you give them a slice of the marketing cost, say call it 10k, that equation comes out at something like £300 or something per customer acquisition. But actually, if you then look at it and say, well, actually, let's look at the fact that in 18 months that person goes, the number of customers that patch generates will go down because there's no one there. The cost will go down by only a quarter. The marketing cost won't shift. So actually, what that does, it adds another 50% to that equation. And I've been through this with a couple of venture capitalists and actually then presented to some of their portfolio using IdeaGen as a good use case. So IdeaGen, 4-year tenure at least, has a customer acquisition cost which is half of most other organizations that are in that space. And it's all about, we don't understand the value of investing and keeping in people. Now let's look at the mathematics of investing, yeah? So Tim will keep me honest on the maths. Okay, let's say that the average cost of somebody being developed in Oracle is £1,000 a year. That's what Oracle will spend per head. Add that in.
Yeah.
It still only brings your customer acquisition cost down by about 2%.
Yeah. So this is why we were talking about the importance of tracking salesperson lifetime value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're working hard at Cranfield and the ISP to actually put a model together. We think we've come up with Radar, which is not a great connotation to a degree, but it says on the tin, which is look at your recruitment, look at your acceleration, look at your inspiration of people, your development and your engagement, and then your retention or your positive release. Right. Let people go. And we've all been in the marketplace where IBM they invested in people to go somewhere else and they would come back. Yeah.
So another topic, but on this line of conversation, when I speak with sales enablement leaders, they put a lot of focus on speed to ramp or ramp time, speed to first deal, second deal. And a lot of the time it feels counterintuitive because they're trying to just, engulf that individual with knowledge about the product and the way they do sales to ensure that they get that first deal quickly. And it sometimes to me feels counterintuitive because you've hired someone to do a good job that could probably do that job very well without being, forced down that particular road. Is that measure? Is there any, what's your view, Andy? Is that measure a good measure for an organization? Speed to first sale, ramp time, shortening sales.
I think it's a valid measure, but not in its entirety. So somebody once asked me, is the sales force, correctly measured? No, I think there's a lot of different measures you could look at around activity, quality of activity, growth mindset, development. One of the things that I love to work with companies and actually present back to them 100% of your sales force, which percentage bizarrely have actually engaged in self-regulated, self-directed learning. And 30% of people will look at it and go, no, it's not. I couldn't care less about learning. I just want my number. So that's great. Assuming, of course, you're going to live in this sales world for the next 30 years, but it's not going to happen. I mean, sales is different than it was 3 years ago because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think it is a number. Let's answer the question. Let's stop doing the Billy Connolly off on a tangent. It is a number, but it's not a number in its entirety, because I think it's important that you do look at the effectiveness of people understanding the product that you sell, the impact it has on either the brand or the factory of the people that you're talking to. And when I say that, Adrian McDonald from Dell, he's now head of Dell, always used to say to me, everything is a brand and a factory. And you're either protecting that brand or you're making the factory go quicker. And if you can't articulate that to people that you're talking to and how you do that, you're never having a C-suite conversation. And you may end up in the operational area where you're explaining how things go faster. So that's the first thing. So, you need to get that drummed into people. But I think alongside that, Alex, you need to look at, what am I doing to develop that person's overall skill set? What am I doing to prepare them for the next role? And how am I growing them, or giving them the ability to grow themselves? And how am I giving them other opportunities in which to learn and develop themselves? And we talk about jolt effect, nothing to do with the jolt effect and what they say, otherwise it makes it look like we are. But what was great about the jolt effect is that the way they were able to put on steroids understanding the interaction between customer and salespeople because of the technology of AI and the ability now to assimilate information from that. And the reason I raise it from that, and I know Dr. Dale Charles and I have been talking, we recently wrote an article for Velocity, SAMA, the Strategic Account Management Association, around AI and its implication in account planning. And what we looked at there is a tool now that's used in, and we should get Dale on the call next week to talk about this tool that is being used in academia. And it's actually understanding people's acceptance of coaching by AI. So I have a call with Tim, it records this call, I then upload it into this AI platform, and AI gives me, and only me, the feedback on what I have done and how I have performed with Tim. And it will get better, but all of a sudden now, coaching, I don't need to be coached by you, Alex, as my manager. I can coach myself and understand myself. And that then leads to, in a couple of years' time, what you're genuinely doing is having a session with me to coach my growth mindset and my activities to learn and develop. And does that then say that sales management has got less of a burden and can start to care more about the individual, and the sales individual takes far more responsibility, supported by the organization? And I certainly see that potentially as the next bounce of the ball.
Yeah.
And therefore, employers will look for, where's your learning record? Where's your development? Where's your ethical things? I want to see that, because it's a given. I can teach you the product, but where's the underlying?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to go that way as well. And wouldn't it be good if the AI, you could point the AI in a certain direction? You know, I want to be like high performing jolt sellers. But yeah, no, I wouldn't it be good if we could understand? You might have the data on this already, Andy, but the research that Matt and the team did to create the jolt effect, analyzing millions, I think, of sales conversations. How many of those high performers actually do self-taught, continually teach themselves new things? Or is it all kind of just, it comes naturally as a result of selling day in, day out?
So, and Dale, I know you're on, so if we can invite Dale on next week, because Dale is, he's a guru at crunching data and stuff like that, and he will have far more. He's at Bournemouth University, very well respected. So if we can ask a couple of specific things about those research things, to answer your point, we're just about to look at the top CPD earners in the Institute of Sales Professionals. And they are easily identifiable because the LMS system, the learning management system, tracks who they are. So we can tell how many people have done how many hours. And we classify people as certified if they do 24 hours and expert if they do 48, and some do. What we're doing is looking at the correlation to understand where they are on performance. Now, as the academics on this call will look at, the slight challenge around that is the definition of performance. If I asked all of you what your definition of performance was, Adam in your company, Alex and Tim in yours, it would be slightly different, and that's okay. So what we have to do is look at doing some research that actually looks at perceived performance, and then connecting the two. The indicative research says that there is a connection, to answer your comment, Alex, between high performance and self-directed learning. So there's a correlational effect, correlational relationship. However, finding causation is slightly more difficult. We will have to do mixed method and interview people and then find out what their drivers are. And we suspect that their drivers are wanting to stay at the top. So therefore, they will consume every skill that they can get, every piece of knowledge they can get. But somebody, Lillian, I know what, threw me a curveball when I'm talking about mental health and said, is it because of fear? Do they fear not being a top performer? Therefore, fear drives them to consume as much as they can. And I don't know, but we can't discount that. It would be very silly.
I think it plays a part.
Yeah.
Because at some point on the journey, because in 2005, I'll admit I lost my job for poor performance as a sales director. All right, I wasn't managing a team. I was an individual contributor. But I never forgot that day. And that drove me to teach myself new skills. And it stayed there in the back of my mind as that fear factor. I never want to go back there.
But I think that there's a really interesting thing that you said there, Andy. And I think that part of the challenge was when we're trying to identify what are the drivers and what are the behaviors of people that ultimately become successful at doing this, the difference between correlation and causation is a very important one to identify. And the way to do that is to take people that are not performing and get them to adopt the behaviors of people that are performing and see whether that solves the poor performance. Tim once jokingly said, we were having a conversation, he said, all successful salespeople drive a Porsche. Therefore, if you buy a Porsche, you'll become a good salesperson. He was clearly joking when he said that. But the point is,
Porsche, by the way.
It's Porsche.
Porsche, sorry. A Porsche. But the problem here is that when we look at that kind of exalted area of ultra high performance salespeople, they'll have a load of things that they will do. Some of that will be self-directed learning. Some of that will be the fact they drive a Porsche. Some of that will be the fact that they are motivated and scared. Some of that will be the fact that they have a deep understanding of client needs and of product knowledge, and all of these different things. And to wheedle out which of those are actually driving their performance rather than just being a byproduct of their personality type, I think is an entirely different thing. We need to take somebody that is an average performer and make them a high performer. That way we know that that's the behavior that's driving that.
Yeah. So if we look at, I think Ben talked about this 2 weeks ago, the statistics, about 20% of people would be classified as high performers. 20% would be classified as very little hope for whatsoever because of various different reasons. And then you've got the bit in the middle. The bit in the middle, they just need help. They're not turning up to work to do a bad job. They just need help. So actually then, to your point, that's why I believe sales enablement should be, not revenue enablement. Sales enablement should be coaching the individual, helping that individual learn, scaffolding them and going, okay, Tim, Alex is doing a great job. This is how he does it. Go and spend a little bit of time with him. Then let's have a reflection. And then what additional materials and things can we give you so you feel secure to go and have a crack at what Alex does in your way. And if you fail, you fail. And that's the part of psychological safety. And on that thing, we'll talk about that probably later today or in another session.
We will. So everybody in the audience, thank you all so much for all of your fantastic input. It's been brilliant. Every week we have just mega interesting comments from the audience. And I think that this is something that we need to continue to unpack, because the sales industry is in a state of flux, isn't it? You know, the environment in which it operates has changed, and we all need to understand how sales can reinvent itself to go forward. So thank you everybody on the panel. Thank you everybody in the audience, and we'll see you all either next week or later today.